"That seat's reserved. You'll need to move." The voice was sharp, not angry, worse, indifferent. The usher didn't look up from her tablet when she said it, just tapped twice, swiped left, and gestured with her perfectly manicured hand toward the back of the auditorium. The words hit like cold rain, not loud, not dramatic, but soaked with something colder than hostility, assumption. The man standing before her was small in stature, wiry in frame, his posture slightly stooped from years of wear most men don't live long enough to endure. His suit was pressed, but old, dark navy, with lapels worn shiny at the edges. On the breast pocket, a small pin, an eagle clutching arrows and olive branches, faded but unmistakable. Master Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Cole, USMC, retired. 3 tours in Vietnam, 1 in Grenada, 2 in Iraq, and countless nights staring at ceilings in silence, trying to forget what he could never tell anyone. But none of that mattered to the usher. To her, he was just an old black man standing too close to the VIP section of the Eden Hills Civic Center on graduation day. Raymond said nothing. He just blinked behind his glasses and glanced down at the folded card in his hand, a note written in shaky teenage handwriting in bold blue pen. "Grandpa, front row, I want you to see me. Love, Maya." He looked back up. "My granddaughter wrote—" "Sir?" The usher cut him off, finally making eye contact, the kind of eye contact people give when they're just barely tolerating your presence. "You're not on the list. These seats are for board members, donors, and distinguished guests." Raymond blinked again. "I served." "That's not the same," she replied, almost reflexively. "Please don't make this difficult." He stood there for a second too long, not resisting, not causing trouble, just trying to process the weight of a moment he hadn't prepared for. After everything, after walking through the jungle with malaria, after pulling a bleeding corporal out of an overturned Humvee into Crete, this was what finally made his knees feel weak, a girl with a clipboard telling him he didn't belong. A security guard appeared, as if summoned by the invisible thread of institutional discomfort. "Is there a problem here?" The usher sighed, her eyes still on Raymond. "He's refusing to move from the reserved section." "I'm not refusing. I'm just reading her note." The guard didn't respond. He took one step forward, hands on his belt, the kind of posture designed to remind others who has the authority to make people disappear. "I'll take him to the back. Sir, this way." Raymond looked around. The lobby was buzzing with proud families, camera flashes, and the scent of floral arrangements. No one noticed him, not when it mattered. He nodded once, folded the card with care, and followed the guard to the far back of the auditorium, row Z, behind a column, next to the emergency exit. He sat, quietly, dignified, as he had always done. From the stage, Maya adjusted her cap nervously. She scanned the crowd for him, for the one face she needed more than anyone else. When she didn't find him in the front row, her heart sank. And in the control booth, a technician leaned closer to the security feed and frowned. He recognized that man. He whispered to the event coordinator beside him, "Isn't that the guy that just wrote that piece about? The Marine who saved the unit in Operation Iron Valley?" The coordinator shrugged, not caring. But someone else in the booth did. A woman in a black dress with silver streaks in her hair and a Marine Corps pendant around her neck leaned in, studying the monitor. Her hand froze mid-scroll, her lips parted, her eyes widened. She stood, fast, and everything changed. The silence in the control booth was shattered when the woman slammed her palm on the console. "Do you know who that is?" she hissed at the tech operator. He blinked. "Ma'am, That's Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Cole," she said, voice low but heavy. "Silver Star, Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts. Saved 3 platoons during Operation Iron Valley by fixing comms under fire while his unit was pinned in the Valley Gorge. I was there. He shouldn't be sitting in the back." The booth went dead quiet. Someone in the background muttered, "You sure it's him?" I'm damn sure, she said. He walked on a shattered femur for 8 hours to get us out of there. His radio antenna was shot off, and he turned it into a makeshift signal relay using a broken spoon and parts of his own helmet. The technician looked stunned. Down below, the ceremony had started. Names were being read. Students were stepping across the stage, tassels swinging, proud grins beaming under bright lights. But in row Z, Raymond Cole sat unmoving. He clutched the card his granddaughter had given him. His glasses had slipped low on his nose. He wasn't watching the stage. He was watching the edges, the families together, the front rows filled with suits and pearls and applause he didn't belong to. Not here, not anymore. But something was moving behind the scenes. The woman in the control booth grabbed her phone, scrolling frantically. She tapped an icon, then placed a call. It rang once, then connected. Colonel Mendoza, it's Anna. We've got a problem at Eden Hills Civic Center. A man you know, you owe your life to, actually, was just pushed to the back row like some nobody. There was silence on the other end for 3 seconds. Then, I'm 20 minutes out. Do not let him leave. Not again. Anna hung up and turned to the event coordinator. You need to fix this, she snapped. The coordinator blinked. Fix what? It's a seating issue. No, it's a respect issue, and you just disrespected a man who wrote half the modern comms manual in blood and sweat. The coordinator huffed. Look, I'm sorry, but I can't just bump donors and trustees for some what? Veteran? Hero? Black man? The coordinator froze. Outside, the sun dipped lower on the horizon. Back in row Z, Raymond heard his granddaughter's name. Maya Cole! She stepped onto the stage, her cap slightly tilted, her gown fluttering behind her. Her smile faltered as she glanced again to the front row and still didn't see him. But she kept walking. Raymond smiled even from the shadows. She had made it, and that was enough. Until a voice crackled over the house PA system. Excuse the interruption, a new announcer said, tight with urgency. We have a special recognition to make before our next name is called. Everyone paused. Confused murmurs filled the air. The spotlight flickered, then slowly, gently began to move toward the back, toward row Z. People turned, phones lifted, cameras zoomed in. There, caught in the golden beam of the spotlight, was a stunned Raymond Cole, blinking into the light like a man waking from a long sleep. The announcer's voice grew stronger. We would like to acknowledge a guest whose presence today honors not only one graduate, but an entire generation of service, sacrifice, and silent dignity. Raymond's throat tightened. He stood, slowly, hand shaking slightly, still holding Maya's card. Applause began, hesitant at first, then rolling like thunder from the back, forward. The crowd rose, row after row, until even the front stood, even the trustees, even the donors, and the usher who had told him to move, she stared in wide-eyed horror. Raymond didn't smile, didn't bow, didn't wave. He just stood straight, eyes glistening. The voice continued. Please welcome Master Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Cole, Vietnam, Grenada, Iraq, Silver Star recipient, Bronze Star, Purple Heart with Oak Leaf, and founder of the Quiet Signal Project that's helped over 8,000 veterans transition back home. The crowd erupted, and for once Raymond didn't feel like he was too much, or too late, or in the way. He was exactly where he was meant to be. Maya, still on stage, dropped her diploma and ran, straight through the side stairs, across the floor, into his arms. She didn't care about decorum, didn't care about cameras. She just wrapped herself around him and whispered through tears, They tried to hide you, but I see you. Everyone sees you now. Raymond closed his eyes, then finally smiled. The lights caught the pin on his lapel, and for a moment it glinted like it was brand new. Sir, we're so sorry. It was a mistake. The event coordinator's voice cracked as she spoke, her face pale and sweaty under the scrutiny of nearly 2,000 eyes. She clutched the edge of the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. But Raymond Cole didn't answer. He just stood there, flanked by his granddaughter Maya on one side and Anna, the veteran-turned-broadcast director, on the other. Behind him, the spotlight dimmed slightly, replaced by the softer glow of stage lighting. The room was hushed, heavy with the weight of a mistake that couldn't be undone. "You see," Anna said into the mic, stepping forward without being asked, "we tell ourselves these things don't happen anymore, that we've grown past the days where a man's worth is measured by his clothes or his age or the color of his skin." She turned slightly to face the audience. "But they do. And today it happened to someone who once shielded a wounded comrade with his own body while under mortar fire. Today it happened to a man who used to fix communications towers with enemy snipers on his back. Today, it happened to someone who should never have been made to feel invisible." Applause broke out, not the kind that's prompted by excitement, but the kind that rises from guilt, from reckoning. The kind that says, "We saw it too, and we can't look away anymore." Raymond still hadn't spoken. He looked down at his boots, the same pair he had worn to his final deployment before retirement. The leather was cracked now, faded and scuffed, but still held shape, still stood tall, like he had. "I'm not here to shame anyone," he finally said, his voice calm but deeply resonant. "I didn't come for attention. I came to watch my granddaughter walk across the stage." He paused. "And I was ready to do that from the last row, without complaint, without needing anyone to see me, because that's how I was trained. You show up and you support, even when you're forgotten." The room was silent. "But," he continued, "maybe that's the problem." Raymond stepped toward the mic. Anna moved aside, her eyes wet. "Maybe we've gotten too used to forgetting. We forget the quiet ones, the old ones, the ones who don't demand a stage, the ones who built the roads we now stroll down with our chins high." He turned slightly to look at the audience again. "We forget that the reason you can cheer today is because someone long ago made a choice to bleed quietly in a place no one remembers." He looked down at Maya. She nodded, eyes gleaming with pride. "And we don't need special seats. We don't need confetti, but don't pretend we don't exist." A man in a suit near the front row cleared his throat loudly and stood. "Mr. Cole, Sergeant Cole, on behalf of the board, I want to extend our sincerest apologies. This is not who we are." Raymond tilted his head slightly. "But it is," he replied gently. "It is who you were today, and maybe that's something you need to sit with." The man sat back down, hard. The crowd remained silent, some in tears, others looking down at their shoes like they weren't sure if they deserved to be in the room. Then a ripple of motion. A boy, maybe 12, got up from the middle rows and walked slowly toward the stage. His movements were unsure, awkward. He wore a school blazer that was too big, and he held something in his hand. He climbed the steps, crossed to Raymond, and held out a small object, a folding chair, a tiny hand-painted model. The boy swallowed hard. "My dad is a Marine. He told me to always offer my chair if someone forgot theirs. You can have mine." Raymond blinked, caught off guard. He took the tiny chair in his weathered hands and nodded once. "Thank you, son," he said softly. "That means more than you know." The boy beamed and ran back to his seat. And that was the moment it all shifted. The narrative, the tension, the room. It was no longer about anger or guilt. It was about clarity, about finally seeing what had been there all along. Raymond handed the miniature chair to Maya. She held it close like it was gold. A chair he hadn't been offered, now immortalized by a child who understood something too many adults had forgotten. Anna stepped forward again. "This moment isn't about just one man. It's about thousands like him. And every time we forget them, or silence them, or seat them in the back because we think they don't belong, She looked across the rows of decision-makers, the rows of parents, the rows of students who would carry this memory for years. Break something we don't even see. And today, we fix a piece of that. The audience stood as one. No music, no prompts, no formal announcement. Just a moment of human recognition. A standing ovation, not for a performance, but for presence, for perseverance, for the quiet chair in the back of the room that was never empty, only ignored. The ceremony had paused. The program was behind schedule now, nearly 20 minutes off, but no one seemed to care. The ushers no longer directed guests to their seats. The tech team had stopped switching camera angles. The dean had set down her prepared remarks. Everything that had been rehearsed no longer felt relevant, because Raymond Cole hadn't left. He now stood near center stage. Not behind the podium, not on a platform, just slightly off to the side, close enough that the students could see the lines on his face, close enough that parents could hear him breathe. And when Maya asked him, gently, "Would you say something, Grandpa?" he didn't hesitate. He stepped forward. No script, no teleprompter, just memory and truth. He took a breath, deep and even. "I wasn't supposed to speak today," he began. "And I don't take speaking lightly. But since I've already been seen, really seen, for the first time in a long time, I figure I might as well make the moment count." A few heads nodded. "Some of you know me now. Many of you didn't 30 minutes ago. That's fine. That's not what hurts." He paused, looking out across the auditorium. "What hurts," he said slowly, "is how normal this felt, how familiar." His voice didn't waver. It was firm, grounded. The voice of a man who'd given orders under fire, but now spoke from a quieter battlefield. "I've sat in the back before, not just in rooms, in policy, in memory, in thank you speeches that forgot to name us. I've walked into banks where no one greeted me, even though I had the mortgage papers for 10 families. I've walked into churches where the ushers smiled at my tie, but never asked my name." He looked at the rows of students. "And that's not bitterness, that's truth. And if you're brave enough to graduate today, you should be brave enough to hear it." Maya stood just behind him, tears slowly streaking her cheeks. But she wasn't crying from pain. She was crying from pride. Raymond continued. "I joined the Marine Corps in 1966, back when the recruiter came to our high school, set up a table by the cafeteria, and told us, 'You'll be more than a man. You'll be a Marine.'" He chuckled softly. "I didn't know what that meant until I was in Da Nang 6 months later, knee-deep in mud and regret, wondering why no one told me that being more than a man also meant you'd come home and be treated like less than one." Silence again. Not empty silence, full silence. The kind where every word finds a place to land. "I don't regret my service. I regret how easy it was for people to forget it. How quickly the world moved on while we were still cleaning the mud off our boots and the blood off our hands." He took a breath and looked at the administrator seated in the front row. "Today, you forgot me. But more than that, you forgot what I stand for." The dean lowered her eyes. "I'm not angry," he said softly. "I'm tired. Tired of having to prove that I still matter. Tired of holding my silence so others can keep their comfort. Tired of showing up quietly and leaving without being seen." Then turning back to the students. "But you're starting something new, and you get to decide how you see people, how you treat those who don't dress like you, talk like you, walk like you. How you welcome someone who might not look like they belong, but carries a story longer than your textbooks." He let those words breathe. "Look for the ones in the back row," Raymond said. "They're the ones who've been standing the longest." The crowd murmured. A standing ovation had already happened, but this time people rose again, not in applause, but in reverence. Raymond nodded. "I don't want a statue. I don't want a plaque. I just want one thing." He held up the folded card Maya had written him. "I want to sit where my granddaughter asked me to sit." Applause exploded again. This time it wasn't controlled. It was fierce, emotional, raw. The chair in the front row, the one originally assigned to a trustee who had since slipped out the side door, was brought forward. Maya took her grandfather's arm, and together they walked toward it. He didn't sit right away. He turned around, faced the crowd one last time. "Thank you," he said. "Not for your claps, but for your eyes, for finally seeing." Then he sat. This time, in the right seat. Back in the control booth, Anna wiped her eyes and turned to the technician. "Don't cut the feed. Let it roll. Let them see the whole thing." And so it rolled. Across live streams, across social media, across the country. A grandfather who had been moved to the back, now seated in front, not by force, but by honor. And the internet, so often cruel, so often divided, stood still, just for a moment, just long enough to say, "This is who we want to be." 2 weeks later, a package arrived at Raymond Cole's home. No return address, no markings. Inside was a single object, a handcrafted chair, full-sized, heavy oak, stained a dark walnut, with a brass plaque fixed to the backrest. The engraving read, "Reserved for those we forgot, until we couldn't anymore." Underneath it, one simple name, R. Cole, USMC. Raymond didn't cry when he read it. He simply stared for a long moment, then placed the chair by the front window of his living room, facing outward, toward the street, toward the world. He didn't sit in it, not right away. He wanted people to see it first. The video of Raymond's speech had gone viral, not the kind of viral that trends and fades, but the kind that etches itself into the public's memory. It was replayed on late-night news, shared by veterans groups, quoted by activists. Even high school seniors in other states began referencing it in graduation speeches. Look for the ones in the back row. They're usually the ones who've been standing the longest. And then something strange happened. Chairs started showing up at city halls, at VA clinics, at school auditoriums. Handmade chairs, foldable chairs, reclaimed chairs, each one marked with a tag that said, "In honor of the seat that wasn't offered." A new movement was born. They called it the Empty Chair Project. Not backed by a corporation, not funded by a PAC, just people, students, teachers, veterans, sons, daughters, grandkids. Everywhere, people began reserving the front left chair at events, always left empty, always facing forward, always bearing a simple placard, "For the one who should have sat here." Maya was the one who pushed for it to go national. With Anna's help, she submitted the idea to the National Veterans Foundation. It took 6 days to get approved. In the 7th week after Raymond's speech, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs invited him to D.C., not for a medal, not for a ceremony, but for a meeting. Private, respectful. In the room, he was introduced to senior officials, advocates, and leaders from multiple generations. But instead of standing, they each rose when Raymond entered. And waiting in the middle of the room was, you guessed it, a single chair. Unoccupied, brass-plated, with his name. He shook his head slowly, smiled, and sat, this time on his own terms. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I've got grandkids, and I don't want them to have to give speeches like I did." 3 months later, a new policy was implemented across several school districts, universities, and public institutions. The Chair Clause. Every formal event was now required to reserve one chair, visibly, for an individual or group whose contributions may have gone unrecognized. Veterans, janitors, custodians, forgotten teachers, elders. A small gesture, but it rippled. Maya, now a freshman at a local college, began working part-time with the Veterans Outreach Office. Every time she saw an older man walk into the campus with worn shoes and quiet eyes, she made a point to stop, smile, and say, "The seat up front is yours if you want it." As for Raymond, he didn't change. He still shined his boots on Sunday, still drank his coffee black and early, still showed up to Maya's school concerts, her debates, her protests, her poetry slams, and he always sat up front. Not because he demanded it, but because people no longer forgot to offer. On the one-year anniversary of that fateful graduation, the school invited him back. They called it the Day We Remembered. There was no pomp, no celebrity speaker, just a single wooden chair in the middle of the stage. Next to it, the chair from the original day, the one Maya had written his name on, now enclosed in glass. Raymond was handed a mic again. But this time, he didn't need to explain himself. He simply looked at the crowd and said, "Don't wait for someone to be forgotten before you honor them. Do it now, while they're still standing." Then he walked off stage, quietly, and sat in the front row. This time beside Maya, and this time beside a dozen others who once sat in the back, now finally where they belonged.